Hello and welcome to Biblical Breadcrumbs, where we are continuing with Ecclesiastes. We're in chapter 7 today, and the first verse of chapter 8, because I think that aligns pretty well. We'll go through that chapter in its entirety. There are two halves to this chapter, as we're talking about finding purpose. We're talking about what is worthwhile. We spent a while on money last time, and of course money isn't worthwhile. It's not going to ultimately help you. We spent a while on religion the time before that. Religion will ultimately help you, although it is kind of a terrifying thing, and you need to tread carefully around God and his places and his things, his people, his environments. Now we're in this kind of more meditative chapter. We're in this kind of more generalized, thought-provoking chapter. There are two halves to this. The writer Koheleth devolves into a kind of sing-songy proverb, a series of proverbs, and then a series of statements on wisdom, a few different paragraphs. And so I've divided the chapter up into two basic halves. There's the proverb half, and verses 1 through 14, and there's the paragraph half in verses 15 through the end of the chapter, and even 8 in verse 1 is thrown in there, as Koheleth is just trying to seek out ways that wisdom can work. Money doesn't satisfy you eternally. Okay, fine. Wisdom doesn't really either. And we've come to that conclusion, much like money, we came to the conclusion that money didn't satisfy quite a while ago in chapters 1 and 2, and then he kind of meditates on that in chapters 5 and 6 and realizes, okay, he can pin down reasons why money doesn't work out for him eternally. Now we're here with the same thing with wisdom. Right, we get into the wisdom section, chapter 7, he's reciting a bunch of wise sayings, and then he's saying, okay, why does this not work? Or can it work? Or is there any way in which this could work? And he's kind of succeeding. I mean, there are limits to wisdom, but generally, wisdom is still the best choice available, is the argument he's going to make. And yet, in so many ways, wisdom still doesn't save you. It's helpful, sure, you need to do it, yes, but it doesn't ultimately solve the real problem. You need to make sure that you have an appreciation for the benefits of wisdom and the limitations of wisdom, the good and the bad. There is a balance to this. And this is, in many ways, it's the balanced chapter. We're right slightly past the midpoint of Ecclesiastes, and he's kind of weighing these two options. He's weighing them on the scales. That's why that's the picture for this lesson. He has these thoughts that are kind of in conflict, and he's not exactly sure what to do, but balance is good. And so he seeks those things out. Basically, the argument in this chapter is that God has made everything, and so don't overindulge in any particular direction. There are a few considerations that we'll have, but for the most part, that's the basic idea. Ecclesiastes 7, and I'll read all the way through chapter 8 in verse 1. A good name is better than good oil, and the day of one's death is better than the day of one's birth. It is better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of feasting, because that is the end of every person, and the living takes it to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for when a face is sad, a heart may be happy. The mind of the wise is in the house of mourning, while the mind of fools is in the house of pleasure. It is better to listen to the rebuke of a wise person than for one to listen to the song of fools. For as the crackling of thorn bushes under a pot, so is the laughter of a fool, and this too is futility. Oppression makes a wise person look foolish, and a bribe corrupts the heart. The end of the matter is better than its beginning. Patience of spirit is better than arrogance of spirit. Do not be eager in your spirit to be angry, for anger resides in the heart of the fools. Do not say, why is it that the former days were better than these? For it is not from wisdom that you ask about this. Wisdom along with an inheritance is good, and an advantage to those who see the sun. For wisdom is protection, just as money is protection, but the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom keeps its possessors alive. Consider the work of God, for who is able to straighten what he has bent? In the day of prosperity be happy, but in the day of adversity consider. God has made the one as well as the other, so that a person will not discover anything that will come after him. I have seen everything during my lifetime of futility. There is a righteous person who perishes in his righteousness, and there is a wicked person who prolongs his life in his wickedness. Do not be excessively righteous, and do not be overly wise. Why should you ruin yourself? Do not be excessively wicked, and do not be foolish. Why should you die before your time? It is good that you grasp one thing while not letting go of the other, for one who fears God comes out with both of them. Wisdom strengthens a wise person more than 10 rulers who are in a city. Indeed, there is not a righteous person on earth who always does good and never does sin. Also, do not take seriously all the words which are spoken, so that you do not hear your servant cursing you, for you know that even you have cursed others many times as well. I tested all this with wisdom, and I said, I will be wise, but wisdom was far from me. What has been is remote and very mysterious. Who can discover it? I directed my mind to know and to investigate, and to seek wisdom and an explanation, and to know the evil of foolishness and the foolishness of insanity. And I discovered as more bitter than death the woman whose heart is snares and nets, whose hands are chains. One who is pleasing to God will escape from her, but the sinner will be captured by her. Behold, I have discovered this, says the preacher, by adding one thing to another to find an explanation, which I am still seeking but have not found. I have not found one man among 1,000. I found one man among 1,000, but I have not found a woman among all these. Behold, I have only found this, that God made people upright, but they have sought out many schemes. Who is like the wise person? Who knows the meaning of the matter? A person's wisdom illuminates his face and makes his stern face brighten up. That's tough, right? That's a difficult section to grapple with. There are a lot of the Proverbs are all kind of nice and light and fluffy, and there's some serious stuff in there, but a lot of that is easier. Then you get to the end, and it's just like, it's this depressing realization, right? It's back to chapter 1 in many ways. It's the reflection of that, of God made everybody perfect, and here we are. You look around the world, what happened to it? We did it. We did it ourselves. That's what we've done. That's what we've caused on ourselves. God has made man upright, but he has sought out every way possible to mess that up and to just destroy the good things of life and make sure that no one gets to experience that. What a horrible thought. But here we are. That's the life you live in. There's a reason we don't put much hope in things that are under the sun. Again, the idea here is very basic. God made everything. So let's not overindulge in any particular direction. In every case, let's just have some balance as we go through all of this. And we start by talking about the Proverbs. Okay, 14 verses of Proverbs. There are a lot more than 14 Proverbs here, but Proverbs they're hard to preach, right? They have individual parts. If you go and preach the book of Proverbs, I'm not even really sure how to do that. You can't do it. Well, you can do it by reading a chapter at a time, but it gets really weird because, it's one chapter with 30 individual points, and then the next chapter, like the next week, with 30 individual points. And so it's a bit weird to think about that. But basically, here are a list of ideas to consider and to apply appropriately. Here are a bunch of Proverbs, and so you'll get a taste of teaching through Proverbs, even though we're in the middle of Ecclesiastes, and then halfway through this lesson, I'll break and do something else, like the chapter does. In Proverbs, we need to talk about name and your oil. The good name is better than good oil. Oil is an anointment. Oil is something that you would have. It could be a medical appointment. It could be it's a medicine of sorts that helps to heal you. It's not just a medicine, but it's also an anointing to a certain position. Oil is basically this commodity. It's not just a resource. It's a commodity to help you and to really bless you. Your name and your oil. Your name being a good reputation that you have. The oil being something well provided for. Basically, it's better to be thought of well by other people than to think so highly of yourself. It's better to be thought of well by other people than being able to provide everything for yourself. Your name and your oil on balance. It's better death than birth. That's kind of a dark one, right? We always celebrate births and mourn deaths, but Koheleth says, look, it's just better that somebody's dead than somebody's being born. Better to be settled than unsettled. Birth is opening a door to chaos, and death is orderly. Wherever you ended up, you're going to end up in heaven or in hell. One of those is pleasant, one of those is not, but at least you're settled, right? At least there's no more chaos that can happen to you. There's only reaping what you sowed, which is exactly what you spent your whole life working towards. And so at least in birth, you don't have the same kind of, at least in death, you don't have the same uncertainty that you have in birth. Talk about mourning and feasting. Reflect on your mortality. Death is where we all go, so remind yourself of the future. Better to go to a funeral than a party. Better to think about what's happening, because the living take it to heart. It's the end of everyone, and the living take it to heart. Usually I've heard this quoted or referenced as in, you go to the funeral home because the people there at the funeral home recognize that you were there with them and they're appreciative of it, right? Those are the living ones who take it to heart. I don't really think that's what this is talking about. I don't think this is about your relatives. I think this is about you, right? Anytime I go to a funeral home, I've been there a few times for family members, right? The majority of the time I've been to a funeral home is when somebody else in the church has died, and we go to say hello to the family and be there to support them. But there's just something about opening the door and stepping into that place that makes you think about it, right? Why are we driving here? Why are we spending time here? Why are we dressing up on a random Monday afternoon to go and walk into a place that's so deathly quiet? It helps me think about death and the end of all things. It's not a reminder of how nice it is that of how nice people think you are because you showed up at the funeral. It's a reminder to yourself that you're going to be in a funeral home one day. Or maybe you won't be. Maybe you just die by the side of the road. Who knows? But the end is coming for you too. Sorrow and laughter. Think about that. Get serious. Internal and external are not the same thing, and what matters is what is inside. It's not always bad to be sorrowful and sad. It's not always good to be laughing and happy. In many ways, it's better internally for you to be sorrowful than it is for you to be happy. Help sober us up. Not all tears are an evil, as Gandalf says. Sometimes we do a lot to laugh and a lot to avoid sorrow, but there's a blessing in sorrow that you cannot find when you are laughing and distracting yourself from life. Mourning and pleasure. The wise take heed to reality. The mind of the wise is in the funeral home. The mind of the fool is out at the party. The fool is trying to distract himself. He knows these bad things are happening, and he just kind of puts on his blinders and his little headphones and goes on his way to ignore everything. It's the same argument that was made in chapter 5 and verse 20, that money can distract you from the horror that is your life and how bad everything is. When you have money, you spend it, you can use that. That's the gift of God, so that you won't often call to mind the years of your life, because God is keeping you busy with the joy of your heart. But at the same time, the argument I made last time is, if you always live in this kind of bliss state where you ignore what's happening, you're never going to face reality, and that's not going to end well for you. Wisdom and foolishness. Why not listen to the wise? Why not? Who are you listening to? The fools make a lot of noise, the crackling of the thorns under the pot. When you light a fire, when you have wood under there, wood doesn't pop a whole lot, but it does provide a really good steady heat. Meanwhile, if you put a thorn bush in there, it cracks and it pops and it makes all sorts of noises and sparks, and it sounds like it's doing a lot, but they're the stuff that burns quickest. One of them sounds good, but is useless. One of them doesn't sound as good, but is much more useful. Which one will you listen to? The fools make more noise, but the wise make more sense. Oppression and wisdom. These are not complementary ideas. If the wise oppress, they're not considered wise. If the wise are bought, they're not considered wise. Some people have a reputation of wisdom, and yet a lot of people are way too quick to sell that for something else, to squander their blessing of wisdom in the pursuit of something else. Don't mix the two. If you are wise, be wise, and leave it at that. Patience and arrogance. Better to finish than to start. The end of the matter is better than the beginning. Patience of spirit is better than arrogance of spirit. Basic supply and demand stuff, right? The economic principle, where the thing that is, when you have a whole lot of one thing, you have a whole ton of supply, the demand is not going to be as high, or the price is not going to be as high, because you have way too much of it. But if something is much more rarer, it's much more worthwhile. Which one's more rare? Beginning something or ending something? I mean, I can't tell you the number of projects that I've begun and then abandoned. There's never an ending to those. There's never a way to fix that. You can't end a project without beginning it, but you can begin a lot of projects without ending them. Which one is more important? That you see something done, or that you start, even with a good intention, you start something and then abandon it halfway through? Which one's more important? What's more valuable? Anger and haste. Don't be so quick to respond. Don't be eager in your spirit to be angry. Anger resides in the heart of fools. Quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. Rushing brings you trouble. Don't do it. It's not going to end well for you. Don't be hasty to harbor anger in your heart. It's just not worth it. Wisdom and times. Quit hyper-fixating on the past. Don't ask yourself, why is it that the former days were better than these? It's not from wisdom that you ask about this. Notice, he doesn't say that the ancient times weren't better than these. In many ways, you look at the modern world and you look at the ancient times, and in many ways, they were better than these that we live in right now. But in many other ways, they weren't. There's balance there. Yeah, there were some things that were a lot more better, and there are some things that were a lot more worse. But either way, you live in the present. You're not going to bring the past back. Remember the good that was in the past and then move on. You can't live in the past. No, it's not from wisdom that you dwell on all these things. It just doesn't ultimately matter. When you say, oh, back in my day, this or that was better or worse, maybe it was, but who cares? Because it just doesn't matter. It's not practical. It's not going to help you in any way. Wisdom and money is the last one. Which one's more important for you? Money can do some things. We talked about that last time. But money can also do a lot of bad things. Wisdom, along with an inheritance, is good. Wisdom is protection, just as money is protection. But wisdom can keep its possessors alive, and money can't. So which one would you rather have? Wisdom or just a bank account? Wisdom can help you use money, but money cannot help you use wisdom. Which one is better? Which one is rarer? Which one is more valuable? Of course it's wisdom. The conclusion is God has put all these different things, right? You look at all these different pairs and they're kind of balancing back and forth, and you're wondering, well, I shouldn't be sorrowful all the time, but I shouldn't be laughing all the time. I shouldn't be mourning all the time, but I shouldn't be feasting all the time. I shouldn't be fixated with death, but I shouldn't be fixated with birth. I shouldn't be fixated with just a reputation, but I shouldn't be fixated with just money either. Which one is the right answer? And the answer is, yeah. You haven't been balanced. Wisdom is good when paired with money. It's good without being paired with money, and money is not particularly good without being paired with wisdom. But at the same time, you can have all the wisdom in the world and have no money and starve to death in the street. You need both. You need both. It's not one against the other, it is both and. It's not the past versus the present. It's both of them together. Remember what was good, but then dwell on what's good nowadays too. Remember what was bad back then, and then remember what's bad nowadays too. But God has made all these different elements in the world. And that's the thing we have to keep in mind is God has made this in such a way. He's organized this. And there's nothing that you can do to change it. Verses 13 and 14 are in many ways, I know the thesis statement comes at the beginning of the book. And it really does, right? Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. But this is the other kind of main statement in my mind. Chapter 7, verses 13 and 14. Consider what God has done, and who can straighten what he's bent? That's a sobering concept when you think about it, isn't it? Because the question is not, did God do something good? Because, yeah, God does good things, right? The question is not how good is what God has done. The question is not, it's just different. Normally, when we come to this conversation, we ask the question, how, we come to life with this fundamental basic understanding that the things that God did are all good and there's nothing bad and everything's good and perfect. And then you experience a little bit of life, and you realize that's not how it is, actually. God is good, sure. But he's also made a bunch of stuff that just is broken, and it just doesn't work. And it's just depressing, right? There's nothing I can do to fix all the problems in the world. Again, this is back to chapter 1. There's a cycle of life. A generation goes and a generation comes, and the earth remains forever, and the water comes down and the water goes back up, and the water remains forever, and it just doesn't matter because there's nothing you can do to change it, and it just keeps on going. This is chapter 1 all over again. But here's the fundamental statement is it's not that we messed up the world entirely, right? We'll get to that conclusion at the end of this chapter, but hold on a second. It's not God has made everything straight and we have bent it. It is God has bent things and we can't straighten it. God has built humankind with a fixed mortality where at some point we will all die, and there's nothing you can do to change that. God has built humankind with the understanding of, hey, we can't go in all these different directions that we want to. Planned obsolescence period is usually what I say for it, is there's a time at which you're just going to run out. That's what God made. He made the world to be temporary. He made the world to be kind of messed up. He made the world to be mundane. Mundus is Latin for earth. I do believe it's one of the words for it, or earth or ground or something like that. Mundane is the word we get from it. It just means earthly. It's just boring. It's just everyday, run-of-the-mill, nothing actually matters type existence. That's what the earth is, by definition. And yet we put all our value here. That's so stupid. What are we doing? Just quit. God made things bent. God made things a little bit dysfunctional, a little bit suboptimal, a little bit messed up, so that we would remember to look somewhere else. That's kind of the fundamental argument of Ecclesiastes. I have experienced so much of the world, and none of it is working for me eternally. Yeah, because it's not supposed to. God has made it bent. God has made these things messed up. And you can fight against reality all you want to. You can fight against the balance that he's made. You can do whatever it takes to find peace with yourself, but you're not going to change what God has made. So quit wasting your time. Be thankful for your limits and appreciate and respect God's boundaries. It's such an important concept that we just don't think about enough. God made the good days, prosperity, be joyful. God made the bad days, adversity, be sorrowful, and use that as an opportunity to consider what God has done, which is he programmed a world in which things would break. Why did he do that? If not to redirect you and help you to think about him. Those are the Proverbs. That's bite-sized wisdom. So here are some longer paragraphs as we move on. We'll think about the practical side of things. What do we actually do as we go out? How do we keep this balance? How do we keep these kind of these alternating, conflicting ideas? How do we keep those in balance? How do we keep those in our minds? Well, there are two main ideas you need to think about. One of them, and they're both related, right? It's watch your excesses and watch your company. Be careful what you surround yourself with in terms of money and resources, and in terms of the people that you surround yourself with. Watch your excesses is first. Moderation is good, and yet in verses 15 through 24, overemphasis on any particular direction is really not. What's the point of being way on one side of an extreme versus another? And so he has some examples of this, right? Righteousness and wickedness in verse 15. There's a righteous person who dies in his righteousness, and there's a wicked person who lives long in his wickedness. So what's the point? Why be overly righteous, or why be overly wise? You can't necessarily change your physical consequences by picking one. Righteousness and wisdom oftentimes ruin us in verse 16, while wickedness and foolishness oftentimes kill us in verse 17. And it's not good to be overly invested in either one of them. Why be so dedicated? Live in the balance, for it's good that you grasp one thing while not letting go of the other. The one who fears God comes out with both of them in verse 18. And you start to say, whoa, what does that mean, right? What is this idea of being overly righteous in verse 16? If there's anything that we should be overemphasizing. One would think it would be righteousness or maybe wisdom. But we already know that wisdom is not valuable to overemphasize. With much learning brings much sorrow. Chapter 1, at the end of chapter 1. The more wisdom you have, the more pain you bring on yourself. Okay, maybe not overly wise, fine, maybe that would ruin us, but overly righteous, what exactly does that mean? And I don't know. But there are 3 different suggestions that I would give to you as to what this phrase kind of means. What does it mean, don't be overly righteous? We could be talking about taking the view of under the sun and talking about physical life, right? Don't be overly righteous under the sun, because honestly, if you're just thinking about the physical world, what's the point? If this physical earthly existence is all there is all that exists, then what's the point of being overly righteous? Righteousness, if you are righteous, that can help some people be nice, but it'll also make some people rude to you because a lot of people don't like it when you're righteous. And that's basically it. Conscience can cause you to do some pretty stupid physical things. Treating someone fairly, not always a profitable business practice, right? Trying to make things right. If you have, I've been thinking a lot about kind of the board games and stuff, right? That's one of my hobbies, one of the things I really like. And occasionally you'll run across, a card or a manual that is misprinted. And ideally, the company would say, "Oh, we misprinted something here. Let me print out a new card for you and send it to you." But they don't really do that often. You know why? Because it's prohibitively expensive. If you had a good conscience, you would say, "Oh, I messed something up. I need to replace that." But do you know how many thousands of dollars that would lose them? Do you know how expensive that is? Of course that's not going to happen, because having a good conscience and being fully righteous is not really helpful for your business prospects. Fair trades, not always helpful. I mean, there's a reason you go to a car lot, you go to buy a car, and the sellers are trying to big up how good their car is and how you need to pay a lot more money for it. And you're trying to find nitpicks with the car so that you can pay a lot less money for it. You're trying to haggle your way down. They're trying to haggle their way up. You're talking about these things. I mean, if you had a good conscience as a buyer, you would probably say, "Okay, yeah, it's not actually that bad. Sure, I'll pay the price." If you had a good conscience as a seller, you'd probably say, "Oh, yeah, it does have those defects. I'm not actually going to argue for a higher price, and I'll actually drop it a little bit for you." If you had a good conscience, these things would not be very profitable for you. Reimbursements. Nice in business just bankrupts you. It's an easy thing to do. And so maybe Koheleth is talking from the perspective of under the sun, being righteous isn't actually going to help you that much. Alternately, this could be a statement in view of verse 20. Verse 20 says, "Look, there's not a righteous person on earth who always does good and doesn't ever sin." That's just a fact. In other words, know your imperfections. You're not going to be absolutely perfect. Some people build themselves up so much and they think so highly of themselves, and that's a sin and a problem in and of itself, but we're not going to address that right now. But some people do think so highly of themselves and how righteous they are and how good they're trying to be, that when they finally realize that they have an imperfection in even just one singular tiny area, their entire life is destroyed because they can't believe that they were that bad the whole time, or whatever it is. Don't ignore sin, right? Sin separates you from God, and it's not good, but at the same time, do understand reality, right? God forgives sins. One sin, repent of it, and God will forgive you and move past it and don't do it anymore, right? Go and sin no more. Sometimes that's the answer to sin, but there are a lot of people who try and pretend that everything is fine and they've never done anything wrong, only to eventually find out that they have, and then they fall apart entirely. Well, don't do that. Know your imperfections. Don't be overly righteous. Stop just being pretentious about it, right? It's going to fall apart one day, and it's not going to help you. Also, that might be a kind of holier-than-thou type situation. If you just believe you're better than everybody else, then that's not going to help your life either. Don't pretend that you are absolutely perfect. Don't be overly righteous. You'll just end up being a jerk and nobody's going to like you, and that's not going to help you either. Or this could be a statement of don't be overly righteous in view of verse 23. I tested all this with wisdom and said, I will be wise. But wisdom was far from me. Sometimes you need to be careful about how you approach the things that you're going to approach. Direct pursuit is not always helpful. Koheleth says, if I try to be wise, I'm seeking wisdom. I will be wise. Well, that makes me a fool because wisdom runs away. As soon as I look at wisdom, directly at wisdom, and I want to aim straight towards wisdom, I end up falling into foolishness. But a lot of times, if I just live normally, I can do wise things without even thinking about it. Some people, when you hyperfixate on something like wisdom or something like righteousness, sometimes it's a lot more difficult to actually get there. When I have, typically when I struggle with sin, the more I think about, hey, this is the right thing to do. I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to put this at the forefront of my mind and always focus on doing the right thing instead of doing the wrong thing. A lot of times when that's my focus, when I have just like a perfect thought of, hey, I'm going to do the right thing all the time, sometimes that just reminds you that there is a wrong thing, and then you start thinking more about the wrong thing, and then you start kind of wanting to do the wrong thing, and then you end up doing the wrong thing because you've been thinking a lot about the wrong thing. Don't do that, right? That's not always helpful. Actually, the times that I am best about not sinning and being evil is a lot of times when I'm not hyper fixated on doing the righteous thing, because a lot of times then I'm just living my life and I'm not even thinking about the wrong thing that exists, and I don't even remember I can do it. Maybe guard your approach. I don't know exactly what he's writing. I don't know exactly what not overly righteous means, and I don't exactly know what it means for him and what it means for me, but I would say be careful approaching righteousness. Seek it, but don't allow righteousness to get in your own way. Watch your excesses. Be careful with being too harsh, too merciful, too judgmental. Be careful with all of these things. Just live in balance. My favorite from these verses are verses 21 and 22. Don't take seriously every word that you hear, because you may hear your servant cursing you, but if you really think about it, you'll examine yourself and realize you've cursed a lot of people. Number one, you kind of deserve it. And number two, you may well not have meant it back then, and they may well not mean it right now. So just guard yourself. Just be careful, right? Live in moderation. At the same time, you need to watch your excesses. You also need to watch your company. And that's the last point that we're going to end on here. This example is for wisdom, right? But it works for righteousness too. Be careful who you surround yourself with, because they will influence you. This is true for young people. It's right. A lot of times we say, oh, young people, you need to be careful about choosing your friends. Yeah, old people, you need to be careful about choosing your friends too, right? Watch who you spend time around. Watch your company. Watch who you spend time with. I directed my mind to know and to investigate, to seek wisdom and an explanation, and to know the evil of foolishness and the foolishness of insanity. And I discovered that there are some bad people. There's a woman who abducts people, but it's not just the woman who's the problem. I've sought righteousness. In verse 28, I found maybe one man and 1,000 and 0 women. Basically nobody. When you evaluate who you want to surround yourself with, be careful with it, because there are so very few good individuals in the world. Just be careful who's around you. You want wisdom? Find wise people. If you find evil people, you're going to seek evil. If you find foolish, stupid people, you're going to seek stupidness, because that's what you're surrounding yourself with, and that's what you are teaching yourself. If I had to, practical example of this is, you cannot control who's in the classroom with you, but you can control who you eat lunch with, right? You can't control who is in your workplace, but you can control who you spend time with afterwards, who you actually go out of your way to say hello to and stuff like that. Just don't get tangled up in the wrong people. Not with the wrong woman. Verse 26, Proverbs has quite a bit to say about that, especially thinking from a man's perspective. Hey, you think about stupid or evil women who ensnare you and pull you aside. Just don't do it. It's not worth it. At the same time, don't get tangled up with the wrong men. How many humans are there who it's really worth spending time with them? Life is, in many ways, it's about finding the needles in the haystack. How many people are there who genuinely make you a better person? It's not that many. So when you find the few who do, stick really close to those ones. Don't throw those away. Watch your company and who you spend time with. But the sad truth is, most of humanity, even though God made us good, God made people upright, we've messed that up. We've sought out many schemes. We've figured out every way in which we can be bad, evil. We figured out every way to distract ourselves from what is good and just not do the good or actively do the evil. Whatever it is, we've found ways to mess things up and do the wrong thing. Seek the few who are good. You can tell who they are. Chapter 8 and verse 1, who's like a wise person who knows the meaning of a matter? A person's wisdom illuminates his face. It makes his stern face brighten up. You can look at a person and say, wow, that person's wise. There are also a lot of people where you can look at them and say, wow, that person's messed up. Maybe I shouldn't be spending all my time with them. Maybe I shouldn't be letting them have an outsized influence on who I am. Now, this is not to say that we're never to associate with less than perfect people. If we were supposed to cut off contact with all less than perfect people, none of us would exist, right? Because we are all less than perfect people, and it's impossible to find a life full of perfect ones. And that's true if you're in the church. The church is not full of perfect people. The church is full of messed up people who are hopefully trying to be better, but even so, some of them aren't. It's true outside the church, where a lot of people just really don't care. No human achieves God's standard perfectly. But our goal is to spend more time with the best people who are actually trying to be godly. Yeah, you're not going to find a crowd of perfect human beings, but hopefully you find the ones who will point you towards God. And you need to stick with them. That's part of what the church is. It's bad people who are trying to be good, but it's also the opportunity for God's people to not be alone, for God's people to have company with us. We need others around. We need people to point us on the right path. And that's one reason why the evangelism is another part of this, right? As much as there are a lot of imperfect people around us, hey, part of our responsibility as church, of people who are faithful to Jesus, is to go and find others outside of that circle and do our best to bring them in and help them see who Jesus is and help them obey and become good themselves, become better themselves. There is no one righteous, not even one, but there are people who are trying, and maybe that's what we're aiming for. Even here, if we are excessively righteous and we say, oh, we can't associate with anyone who is not 100% perfect, we are excessively righteous, you're never going to spend time with anyone. And that kind of defeats God's plan, right? That kind of destroys the church and kind of breaks that apart. So that's not actually what God wants from you. If we're overly wise, oh, we're never going to spend time with anyone who has a bad idea. But that's everybody, right? That kind of breaks apart the whole community and the whole family aspect and the whole other human beings are also made in the image of God. Don't be overly righteous. Don't be overly wise. But do try and be godly as best we can. God ultimately made all sorts of different things, all sorts of conflicting interests, all sorts of conflicting values. And sorrow is good at times, and laughter is good at times, and death is good at times, and birth is good at times. And all these different things, there's a time for those. Chapter 3. And that's kind of where we're at. God made both. When you're thinking about two distinct decisions, recognize God made both. Maybe one of them is righteous and one of them is evil. Well, do the righteous thing, but also recognize there are a lot of things where it just doesn't matter one way or the other, and you're perfectly fine to pick either one of them, and that's okay. Well, that's a little bit depressing. Hopefully, maybe it's less depressing next time. I haven't assembled a lesson on Ecclesiastes 8 yet, but I get the feeling we'll be dealing with some governmental oversight issues and kind of wisdom in the government, and that's depressing from its own right, but we'll leave that for next week. So, thank you for listening. Hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully you have benefited, and it gives you something to think about. God bless, and I will see you next time.